Welcome to Yesa Indigenous Rising podcast on WKBY 1080 Inspirational Radio with your hosts Jason Crazy Bear and Crystal Cavalier Keck. And thank you so much for joining and listening. It has been quite a while since I've talked to my friends, relatives, and allies here on this channel. And, I want to talk to you about two things. One, this past holiday, and two, I want to talk about the MVP Southgate Extension and the air permit board hearing that is coming up. So we had a wonderful weekend. We wrapped up with our Protect Our Community, Our Lives, Our Air rally, community unity rally. We had members from Rockingham, Alamance, and Pittsylvania counties present. We talked about tips and techniques that we're going to do, how we're going to move our community forward, and I will touch on that briefly after I talk to you about this real important lesson about Thanksgiving. And I'm so sorry I didn't get this to you guys before, but it's better late than never. And so you guys know that I am Afro-Indigenous, Black Indigenous. I also identify with my European ancestors that are Scottish and Irish who settled here. They also are very Indigenous. I've met many of my relatives from Scotland. And then, my Indigenous ancestors, I have many. Now, I'm enrolled in the Occaneechi-Saponi tribe here in North Carolina, but our tribe traverses many boundaries. And I want to talk to you about how we celebrated our Thanksgiving. So my husband and I, we had a brief sunrise ceremony where we laid down some prayers, we watched the sun come up, and we talked about what we're going to do for the future. Now, I want to talk about this myth of Thanksgiving. And there's many settler colonial mythologies about Native Americans, about how we were savages, how we dress, how we think. But these are widely held false beliefs that are rooted deeply in discriminatory attitudes and behaviors that are very perpetrated by institutionalized racism. And one of the most celebrated mythologies is the holiday of Thanksgiving, which is believed since 1621 to be a mutually sanctioned gathering of Indians and pilgrims. Now, the truth is very far from this popular imagination. The real story is one where settler vigilantes unyieldingly pushed themselves into the Native American homelands and forced an uneasy gathering upon the locals. Now, in the words of Wamsuta Frank James, he's Wampanoag, the pilgrims had heartily explored the shores of Cape Cod 4 days before they had robbed the graves of my ancestors and stolen their corn, wheat, and beans. Now, these words came from the 1970s Thanksgiving Day speech, which he wrote for the annual celebration of the landing of the pilgrims held each year in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Now, his speech was never presented, and I want to tell you because mainstream media often ask people to tone down their message or actually change it altogether because it doesn't fit the popular narrative. Now, his speech was never presented. The organizers of this celebration reportedly asked to see his speech ahead of time. And according to James in his obituary in the Boston Globe, it allegedly asked him to rewrite it based on that his words were not aligned with the popular mythology. He instead declared a day of mourning. It's the National Day of Mourning on Thanksgiving. Now, Thanksgiving is the third in line of a problematic holidays in the fall season. Holidays that may seem harmless, but they have a grave effect on the well-being of Native Americans. The other two holidays are Columbus Day and Halloween. From the second Monday of October to the fourth Thursday in November, Native Americans are hammered with a barrage of racially offensive, culturally appropriative, and historically inaccurate incalculations. This list is extensive. The Columbus Day parades, the Columbus Day statues, the speeches, and the sales, offensive Halloween costumes, pilgrim and Indian paraphernalia, and of course all the parties, events, and classroom activities that our children are subject to dressing up as pilgrims and Indians. This is an attempt to hide the unpleasant truth about this country's real history. Now, many indigenous organizers are making headway on decolonizing Columbus Day and replacing it with Indigenous Peoples Day, and are also exposing the truth by derogatory Halloween costumes that perpetrate a dangerous colonial narrative and violence. However, Thanksgiving is so deeply cherished by the American society that protests and alternative celebrations have made little impact. In this op-ed by Christine Nobis, who is a Plains Cree Sioux of the George Gordon First Nation, and she's also working with Seeding Sovereignty. Now, it's past time to honor the indigenous resistance and tell our story as it really happened and undo a romanticized notion of the holiday that have long suppressed our perspective. And as an indigenous decolonizer, I call this time of year the season of resistance. With Thanksgiving that has just passed, I ask you to take the time to educate your family, your friends, your coworkers, your colleagues, anybody in the community about Thanksgiving, the real history, to support Native people as they resist the holiday of the narrative, and then to organize or host alternatives to this holiday. There's a couple of books I recommend. Rethinking Columbus, The Next 500 Years. It re-examines the basic truths about Thanksgiving in an educational context. Considering that much of the Thanksgiving mythology is based on sharing food, it is ideal to discuss the importance of indigenous first foods or food sovereignty with our children. The second book I recommend is called 4 Seasons of Corn, a Winnebago tradition. This discusses the traditional process of growing and harvesting corn, decommercializing what we eat, and promoting culturally appropriate foods and agriculture systems of North America. And finally, Decolonizing Thanksgiving, a toolkit for combating racism in schools, is a quick read where more resources are listed. It even has sample letters that can be sent to your children's school concerning problematic Thanksgiving activities. Now, a couple other important events that happen on Thanksgiving would be the Indigenous Peoples Sunrise and the Alcatraz Red Power Movement occupation of 1969. Now, the Alcatraz movement happens every year. Jason has participated in that, and it is where many indigenous people go and they celebrate the morning, the day of mourning. And then the Indigenous Peoples Sunrise is a large cultural event that has been held since 1975. And in fact, many anti-Thanksgiving events that occur around the country each year. And there's one called Truthsgiving. This is not saying it's not about family. It's not about culture, because we always give thanks. We even have in the Haudenosaunee culture the Thanksgiving address. This is called the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving Address. And what it does is it gives thanks before any ceremony or prayer. And we always do this. And it's the Thanksgiving Address, Greetings to the Natural World. And it's 18 of these statements where we try to bring our minds to one. And, of all the things that we have named, it wasn't our intention to leave anything out. And if something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. We acknowledge the water, the creator, the teachers, the stars, Grandmother Moon, the sun, the thunders, the four winds, the birds, the trees, the animals, the medicine herbs, the food plants, the fish, the earth mother, and our people. Now, another important thing I want to talk to you guys about is, tribes that aren't federally recognized face unique challenges, right? It's a verge, some of these tribes are on the verge of an ethnocide, and, just people dying out, being in a federally recognized relationship with the U.S. government means they engage with the tribe in a government-to-government relationship, granting tribe sovereignty and access to resources such as federal funds. But when you're not federally recognized, the federal government, they do not deal with you at all. And this is one of the things that we were talking about with the FERC process. Federal recognition may be an asset, but the process to acquire is far from smooth. The process means tribes must seek approval for recognition from the United States. A nation founded on indigenous genocide, tribes can gain federal recognition by taking their case to court, receiving a presidential executive order, petitioning the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or an act of Congress. Now, it is very difficult for any one of those. And the presidential executive order, that's kind of easy, but also they can be undone from previous presidents. There's many tribes that are going through this process right now. There's also tribes that are going through the congressional process. Now let's get back to talking about our event that we're coming up on December 2nd and December the 3rd. Now there is a air board hearing that is coming up. We really want you to participate. It is very important. This is your chance to get your voice heard. This is like voting. It's very important. This is your basic right. You're standing up for your civil rights and things like that. Now, there is the petition for those who have not been able to speak, and I will share that petition with you. You can sign the petition to the Air Pollution Control Board if you were not able to submit a comment during the early February or early January comment period, or you were able to submit but cannot attend the in-person meetings on December 2nd or 3rd. Now, this is the third time they have, or the second time they have postponed these meetings. We are asking people to deny the permit for the Lambert compressor station. The station will have lasting negative impacts on surrounding communities, and the draft permit application that they've been asked to consider is incomplete. You must deny the air permit for the Lambert compressor station. DEQ began its comment period or comment summary by stating comments were received in support of the Lambert compressor station and the Mountain Valley pipeline, and comments were received in opposition to the draft air permit and the MVP. However, less than 20 written comments out of the total 300 favored permit issuance. The hundreds of remaining comments asked the board to reject the draft permit. Reading those direct comments is critical, as DEQ's summary minimizes opposition and erases serious concerns. You see that? You see how the government is, again, genociding people out for the benefit of them? DEQ's summary states, where these comments were related to air quality, they were in general in nature and did not suggest any specific improvements or shortcomings in the draft air permit. This is demonstrably false. It is very one-sided that you can tell that this who DEQ made these statements. I don't know who drafted these things or if these people are in these people's pockets, but it is terrible. Like, where did we go? Like, where did we go wrong? Comments cited the cumulative impacts that will require a major source permit and insufficient review of hazardous pollutants. Over 290 comments in opposition to the permit included specific concerns about permit inadequacies regarding air quality, the compressor station's emissions, or gave concrete examples of how the air permit could be improved to better assurance that the compressor station's emissions would not harm the public health and the environment. However, DEQ only recognized 29 of those comments as of a detailed or technical nature. Other inadequacies cited were the use of EJ screen rather than the more precise data collected, and the discrepancies within the consultant's environmental justice report. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, like many of these politicians, I'm going to give you a quote. My grandparents and we watched the Andy Griffin, and I really still like the Andy Griffin show because in the end of the day, they do have good morals. So when a hobo decided to tell Andy he should just let Opie decide for himself how he wanted to live, he had these words of Mayberry wisdom. No, I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. You can't let a youngin' decide for himself. He'll grab the first flashy thing with shiny ribbons on it. Then when he finds out there's a hook in it, it's too late. Wrong ideas come packaged with so much glitter that it's hard to convince them, and other things might be better in the long run. All a parent can do is to say, wait and trust me, and keep temptation away. Somehow we have lost this basic truth. We need to keep these flashy, shiny things away from our community, because in the long run, it is going to be too late to go back and reverse cancer, go back and reverse. Pollution affects our environment. It's too late to reverse asthma. My daughter has asthma. She's had asthma since 5 years old, and we are still struggling today with the change of the seasons, with too much pollen in the air. Whenever there is a bad day outside, she can't go outside because her asthma acts up. It's terrible. It is a bad way to live. And we don't need any more environmental degradations on our land, in our communities, especially right beside where we live and right beside the water that we drink in the banister. Come on. No more flashy, shiny things. Please listen to this pediatrician talk about the effects that compressor stations have on communities, such as the elderly and children.
We know these facilities release chemicals like benzene, which cause leukemia. The question is, are they releasing enough to increase the risk of childhood cancer? And in some cases, it seems as though that may be the case.
I'm Kurt Nordgaard. I'm a pediatrician, and I work at a community health center in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston.
If people knew what I know about natural gas, we would all be moving away from natural gas as quickly as possible.
There is actually an overlap between pipelines and human health, and a lot of that has to do with compressor stations. Compressor stations do release a significant amount of air pollution, and it affects all sorts of health outcomes like asthma, but even health conditions that we now know are related to air pollution, things like diabetes.
There are several studies which have measured the pollution around compressor stations and have found elevated concentrations of formaldehyde, which is toxic and associated with cancer, elevated concentrations of particulate matter, and elevated concentrations of hazardous air pollutants. There are worst case scenarios in terms of both health and safety. Compressor stations do explode, and the impact of those explosions, it's dramatic. But even beyond that, there are health topics, health issues that simply have not been addressed in any fashion. Now that we build these facilities closer and closer to people, this is a growing problem. My greatest concern is when I look at communities like Minisink, New York, where up to 2/3 of residents living within a mile of that compressor station are reporting respiratory symptoms and nosebleeds. And so with children, one of the greatest concerns is asthma. There's indirect evidence that there are heavy metals in natural gas. If children are exposed to those heavy metals, it affects their development. And for the elderly, the major air pollutants that come from burning any fossil fuel, including gas, are increasing their risk of heart attacks and stroke and respiratory disease. The least harmful pollution is the pollution that's never there to begin with. We need to go directly to renewable energy. We need to really push energy efficiency so that we can get rid of the need for pipelines in the first place. So the most important thing is to become involved with these issues. And it is challenging to stop a project like a compressor station, but it is possible. It has happened. We can find a better way.
Moving our community towards a common goal. A strong community can help support your small business by shopping locally, by choosing your services over a chain or a brand. A community can help your home care or lawn care, whether it is providing expert service for your needs or simply walking over to a neighbor's and helping with a project. A community can even help with your children's after-school programs and daycares. We need to get back to a strong community which provides an environment of safety and security. You should feel secure in your own neighborhood. You should feel secure in your city that is protecting you and your neighbors, and they're looking out for you. You're elected leaders. You should feel a peace of mind when your kids go trick-or-treating or when they're in the community. Feel safe when you go for a nighttime jog. No place is perfect, but you should always feel a sense of security when part of a community. Now, getting back to this plays a huge role in our life, and we really want you to be part of our community. So please get in touch with me. You can give me a call at 336-530-0930. I would love to hear from you and see how we can connect. Now, stay tuned. We have an upcoming list of things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about community gardening and how we can get back to community gardening, especially in the wintertime. I have a proven method, and I have a really good way that I can bring to the community, and that's what it's talking about, uniting our communities, people over money. Now, having unity in our community it's important. Communities play an important role in every aspect of our lives. Our communities are in our friends, our families, our employment, our neighborhoods, and so many other places. In the community of Pittsylvania County, Chatham, Virginia, Pleasant Grove, Rockingham County, we find community in sports teams we support, or the artists we enjoy, or even the food that we like. I love growing my indigenous foods. I love connecting with the land. Having a sense of community unites us. Being a part of a community can make us feel as though we're a part of something greater than ourselves. It gives us the opportunities to connect with people, to reach for our goals, and makes us feel safe and secure. It's important for every person to have a sense of community. That's why we built 7 Directions of Service. And I'm so glad you're listening to our podcast, Yesa Rising. A strong community can greatly benefit families and businesses in a variety of ways. In an age of where technology both connects us and separates us, a local community can greatly benefit our well-being and can increase our contentment in day-to-day life. As we get older, it can sometimes get harder to connect with people around us. But that connection will ultimately ease stress and feelings of loneliness. And as a part of a strong community, this community that we're growing here in Bannister, we're a part of a group of people who want to help each other, whether that is socially or professionally. What makes a community strong is its unanimity towards a common goal. Now remember what you're going to do. You're going to show up December 2nd and December 3rd. And you can check out your local NAACP or contact me for more information about what to do on December 2nd and December the 3rd. Thank you for listening to Yesa Indigenous Rising on WKBY 1080 Inspirational Radio. And as always, we'll see you soon.